to the show with your friend and mine. So tell me, Dr. Squee, who's it gonna be this time? We like to hear you talk, but we love to hear you listen. And if you are not subscribed, you won't know what you're missing. So welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. Headphones up. Here we go.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Squee Show. I'm Dr. Squee and this is my show. My guest today is a writer and director behind the new film The Last Deal, out in theaters and on demand on the 7th of February. A black market marijuana dealer tries to make one last score before getting squeezed out of the business when cannabis becomes legal. Please welcome to the Dr. Squee Show, Jonathan Salemi.
Should I walk in?
How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you.
It looks a little bit warmer where you are than it is over here.
A little. It's probably in the 60s, I'd say. Yeah.
I have no idea with Fahrenheit, so I'll take your word for it.
Oh yeah, well, we're in Los Angeles, so it's not too bad.
Excellent. So, like, the first thing I wanted to talk about was The Last Deal. I watched it when I got sent the screen. Absolutely fantastic film, by the way. But before we get into that, I just want to quickly ask you about one other project on your credits there. Married at First Sight, where you were a producer or are producer on that. That kind of over here certainly has been quite a phenomenon. What's it like working in reality TV and working on that show?
It's fun. It's a lot of moving pieces at one time. So I was one of the producers of one of the teams. So There's 3 different couples on every season, and then each couple has their own producers. So I was one of the producers on one of those teams, and you're basically following a couple around. They've never met each other, and they get married. They see each other on the altar. So it's a lot of fun. It's very high pace, high energy. And you're just always putting them in different situations so they can talk and get to know each other. And yeah, it's all real. We don't really manufacture much, you know? I mean, you put them in situations that they'll have to talk or show teamwork or use their pros and stuff like that, but yeah, no, it's all real.
I could imagine working on something which, as we say, it's like a reality show. It's all real. I can imagine the agility you have to have on that is great training for, or great, it gives you something extra for when you're going into your own films again.
Yeah, or vice versa. I didn't start doing reality till like probably 7 or 8 years making movies. So, it's the same circus, just a different tent.
I like that metaphor. The Last Deal, such an interesting story. Why was this the story you wanted to tell at this point, and where did the idea come from?
So I was looking for a very commercial project that I could get behind, that also I could instill some of my own soul and personality into. And it took me a long time to find the right script. And then in October 2019, I was watching a Cassavetes movie from the 70s. And it was about a gentleman played by Ben Gazzara who was the owner of a gentleman's club. And he gambles on the side. And he lost a gambling debt. And he made a deal with the people he shouldn't have. And I was like, oh, that's a really simple idea. I like that. I can make that. And the film was shot very like, if you're looking at the early 70s, like those films back then, there's a bit of a guerrilla style to them because they're very guerrilla. Well, they're very gritty. There's a bit of a guerrilla style to them because they're very gritty. I was like, oh, I can make that. So I basically used, I had a checklist of all these things that I had access to. And one of them was like cannabis fields and planes and airplane tarmacs and stuff like that. And so I basically knew like the elements I had. And I was like, okay, where can I put these elements into a story? So when I watched that movie, I was like, oh, here's the vehicle for what my story is for my character. Have him behind. He has some debt that he needs to pay. He goes in with the wrong people. Instead of a gentleman's club, he owns a cannabis business. And I know about cannabis laws, and in California became legal. And one of my good friends is a grower turned dispensary owner, and he couldn't get a license, and he got squeezed out of the business. So I was like, okay, well, that's my story right there. I'll have a guy who has a successful business, but now falls on hard times, and he needs to make a deal. He needs to make a big splash and leave the business as well, at least this character's case. So all those things all came together one night in October. And then I wrote an outline, gave it to some friends, and I was writing the film right away, and we were shooting less than a year after.
I don't know if you're familiar with El Mariachi, but I believe that's what Rodriguez used as well. It's like he just looked at, like you said, took an inventory of what was around him, including the turtle, I believe, which appears, or tortoise, which appears in that film as well.
Yeah, no, very much the same thing. So when I made my first feature, Rodriguez's book, I forget what the name of that book was. Because he had a diary of that film. I think it was like. I couldn't tell you the name. Yeah, but I remember I read that book as I was making my first feature, and I met Robert Rodriguez, like when I was shooting that feature, and I told him, hey, I'm reading your book, and yeah, it's basically the same thing. Like, he made that film for $7,000 and just went to Mexico and got everyone he could and put them together and shot in the streets. It was very much the same exact thing. It was basically my El Mariachi.
Well, that's brilliant. And it seems such a timely story where so many states are legalizing cannabis. And so I think this will always be a film of this moment. Was that something you were conscious of? Did you want to make something which was like tied to now?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure it was very current and unique. So whatever that vehicle was, or that story I was telling, I wanted it to have its own unique aspect to it. And that was this is something that I haven't seen anyone else doing. And then I don't know how much you know about laws and legislation and what's going on with safe banking. So Senator Schumer and Cory Booker they've been trying to pass the Safe Banking Act, because currently cannabis dealers and dispensaries and growers, they don't have access to safe banking. So they can't use banks. They can't get loans. They can't even, like your American multi-state operators that are growing marijuana and stuff like that. They don't have access to the same tax laws that you have. So you could write off your show. These cannabis people can't. So I knew a lot about that, and it made it very unique in that regard.
Yeah, because I remember seeing a piece from Last Week Tonight by John Oliver, where he was talking all about this. He did like this huge feature, and it just seems like we've got to the point of some states in America legalizing cannabis, but it's almost like the law and the kind of, you almost feel like it's almost a pushback to not pass these laws, to make it, like, even though it's legal, to make it a reality, like for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's because maybe the U.S. is making more money off of it not being legal than legal.
Right. That's interesting.
Because the taxes, like, they're paying crazy taxes and stuff like that. So it all comes down to the money. And yeah, so it's Mitch McConnell that puts the stop to it each time. And maybe, that guy's like, what, 105 or something like that? So
yeah. So in touch with people.
Yeah, so he must know all, or like it's one of two sides. He either is completely against, he thinks of it as a drug, or he's like, hey, we're making a lot of money off of this. Now, I'm not sure if that's the case. I'm not as educated in that regard for what he's thinking, because I can't think for him, but it's definitely one of those two camps. It's either he feels like it's a drug that is harmful, which I think that's what he thinks, or at the same time, we're making a lot of money off of this not being legal yet. So
yeah, it seems like a a compromise at the moment, which is serving no one. So it's legal, but no one can actually do anything with it, or no, it's restrictive what people can do with it, and like legitimate business owners can't. Like even when it was just for medicinal purposes in a lot of states before it started being legalized, it seemed to already be this problem, like you say, of safe banking.
Correct. Yep. So I basically just used a lot of that knowledge.
And did that come from the conversations with your friend who's the grower? Did you talk to any other people about kind of to educate yourself? It sounds like you're already pretty knowledgeable about it.
Yeah. So my buddy, he's been growing for a bit. So I remember like 15 years ago going in he took me to downtown LA, and we're like in this like horrible street, and there's a warehouse, and he just opens the door, and I walk in, and then he opens another door, and just like poof, like the yellow like sodium vapor lights, or whatever they're called, the fluorescent lights. And I was just amazed. And he was growing. He had this big warehouse, and he was doing well. And he's one of my close friends, so I talk to him often and see him. And so I was like right there every step of the way with how the business was treating him. And then in 2016, when I think it was Prop 65, when that passed, making cannabis legal in California, all the dispensaries popped up on every corner. I saw how his business started going down, and then just trading cannabis stocks with my dad and getting up to date on all the research there, which is why I know about like McConnell and Schumer and Booker and all of them, is because following the cannabis laws and just learning about the space for how it works legally. So the combination of boots in the ground combined with how it works legally.
And there are some absolutely wonderful action pieces in this film, and I think where you had kind of some wonderful locations as well. But like, what's it like trying to shoot action on an indie budget?
It's very stressful and anxiety ridden, because just for disclosure, like I'm shooting with no permits, so I'm shooting on LA major bridges, like tunnels, like the biggest tunnel in Los Angeles. You're shooting on the LA River, like where the 134, which is a major freeway, is overhead, and everyone can see you. So you're doing all this stuff with cameras rigged onto cars, and doing action scenes in the river with 20 people there. It's very stressful, but what puts me at ease is I always have a plan B. So if it doesn't work here, we're going to move the circus down to here. So that makes me feel better. But still, like, you have all these people with all these schedules you're trying to meet, and you only have them for a certain amount of time. It can be quite stressful if you're not prepared.
It's difficult to get access to these kind of more public locations, because you mentioned the ones which you had at your disposal, but you've said about like shooting on the freeway and things like that. Is that difficult to get permission and are you sort of kind of restricted by times you can film?
Oh, for sure. So like Sala, for example, Sala, who plays the boss, him, Mike Ferguson, Anthony, those three, and the rest of the actors too, are working nonstop. And to get them there is a miracle. But if we can't shoot or we don't get the shot, to reschedule it is incredibly difficult. The thing that I had on my side was this film was shot during the lockdowns of 2020. So we shot in August, September of 2020 when people weren't working. So I had these people available for a very short amount of time. But I had to make sure everyone was in. So before we even stepped out there or anything, before we even scheduled the days, I was like, hey, this is the way the shoot's going to go. It's very guerrilla. There's no permits. Are you comfortable with that? And everyone was like, F yeah, they were all aboard, which like me, like I'm a running gunner. So like, I'm okay doing it, but I want to make sure everyone is safe, because the last thing I want is to go out there and someone is now a bit reserved, or they're skeptical about doing this type of shoot. I want to make sure everyone's safe, everyone knows what we're doing, and it was overwhelming. Everyone just being all for it. So it was something I don't want to do again.
Sounds like they enjoyed it though, so like it feels a little bit naughty maybe for them to go and do that.
It's that too, like it's definitely that, and when you're bringing 20 people out on a major LA landmark that you have no permits for at all is a bit unique.
And during the lockdown shooting, it must have been, what extra restrictions does that put on it? What kind of it must have been very anxiety ridden. Just the idea of if anyone gets COVID during this, then especially for an indie movie, it's so difficult to keep going then.
Absolutely. So we COVID tested all the time. Everyone was getting their COVID tests. We kept it as safe as we could. We always for lunch got individual meals, order that way. But no one during the entire shoot got COVID.
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, one thing I did love, which I mentioned before about the locations, I did love the kind of very expansive locations. So you mentioned that you had access to a marijuana grow, to an airfield. That just, I think there was something about the fact that the guy at the heart of the movie was kind of a bit lost and kind of just making up as he goes along, and he's in these stark locations, which kind of gives you that feeling of loss. Was that kind of something purposeful, or have I just extrapolated?
Yeah, I think the main, it's cool that you whoever watches the movie can experience it a different way, and I think it's really cool you experience it that way. I did want to put him in the big city and all these environments, and I wanted to make the world feel very large, So it's like when you watch a Mission Impossible or Christopher Nolan film, they're setting up the deal in Los Angeles and then making the hit in Rome and then paying off the guy in Paris, and I always like that, many locations and stuff like that. So I basically I think I never counted the amount, but there's over 60 locations.
Wow. And does it, are you comfortable? I would imagine with the bigger locations where you choose to set up the cameras, where you kind of get the up close, where you get the kind of expansive shots, which you've got in this film. Is that something that just is instinctive to you? Do you kind of have to plan that out a lot in advance? Yeah.
So Dominic Lopez, the DP, who did an amazing job, we had a plan for every day, and how we would shoot it, and the challenge with something like this, when you have so many locations and so many company moves, a company move is when you take your entire crew and cast and go from location A to location B in a car, you got to move, and so we can only shoot so long in each location. And we planned it all out that we were always getting enough coverage. One of the things you find in films of this size is you're not seeing a lot of coverage. You're seeing maybe they missed coverage and you get lost as a viewer. And it was very important for me to get all my coverage and get all the shots I needed. Although I'm shooting each scene in 4 hours. Every scene is shot in 2 to 4 hours, I'd say. And then moving on to the next thing, but no, we did great. I was very pleased with how many camera setups we were getting.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask a few questions about the kind of the stars of the film. So Anthony Molinari as Vincent, we follow him throughout the film, and I mean, it must have been such a challenge for him to keep because he's got to be pretty much tense the whole movie, pretty much running on adrenaline. To keep that kind of going as an actor must have been so difficult.
Yeah, no, he did an amazing job there. And I don't know, we talked about this after. I don't know if it was because of the lockdowns and because of COVID and everyone already had a sense of anxiety about them and it carried into the characters, but he did an amazing job of just being this very like as you were saying, like anxiety-ridden person that's on the go, and I think the shoot maybe has something to do with that too. Like we're here for 4 hours, get all your shots, know all your lines, boom, we're moving from Burbank to Studio City, which is a 10-minute drive apart. We're gonna shoot here, so I don't know if that did it. And then I remember on day 3 we're at the airplane at the airport. And I was talking to Anthony in the side, and I was like, I was telling him like like we're setting up for the next shot. So I just was giving him some direction. I was like, hey, when I wrote this film, I wrote it very anxious, like very anxiety ridden, and that's why I see the character like they're just going. And that's the way I wanted the film to play. And I think Ryan Liebert, that cut it, did a great job of bringing out those qualities and picking up all of Anthony's nuances.
Gigi Gustin, so she was playing the girlfriend Brittany, so she had to, I think it's a challenge in another way. So for a lot of it, she had to be in that same kind of tense mode, but she also had to be almost the calming center for our protagonist. Perhaps just talk about the process a little bit for her and working with her on that.
With Jeffrey, the actress?
Sorry, no, Gigi.
Gigi. Oh, Gigi Gustin?
Yeah.
So Gigi was, you're referring to so she was in the scene with Marcus when they were doing the deal inside the house.
Sorry, I think I might have got my actresses mixed up.
Yeah.
Apologies, pardon me.
Are you thinking of his girlfriend?
Yes, pardon me. Sorry, I think I picked the wrong character. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Gigi did a great job too. She was there for a day.
Sorry, I really suck with names. So no,
it's fine. So Jeffrey Lauren played Tabitha, his girlfriend, and yeah, she did a great job of being like the center, like
yes,
like having that that calming energy, but also like stability and basically being like the true north, like the direction he should be guided. So, and she was going on in her own personal life, was her own chaotic stuff happening because of COVID and lockdowns and stuff like that. But no, she did an amazing job of being like I basically based that character on my own wife, like all the chaotic stuff that I'm going through, and she's always like the center.
Because I think, where she was finding out information as it kind of went on, so she didn't know everything when she had to run from people. So it's kind of like the challenge, I think, there was also to portray the fact that they've got this relationship, so they already trust each other, and that's really difficult to do without kind of like any sort of extra dialogue, which you'd have to write pages to justify, which slows down the pace. I just thought that was a wonderful job on that.
It's great. It's great. Yeah.
As Salah Baker, you've mentioned before, most notably, by the way, played Sauron in Lord of the Rings for anyone watching. Such a formidable character, and I kind of thought it was really interesting that you simply called him the boss in the film.
Yeah, yeah. Like when I wrote the first draft, I just try to buzz through it, and I just put whatever first names come to mind. So he was called the boss, and Mike Ferguson, his right-hand man, was called the associate. And, and the girlfriend Tabitha was called Tabitha, and Vince was named after a buddy of mine, Vince. And the names just stayed. I was like, okay, all right, sure. As I kept going through the drafts, I was like, that's their names. But Salah, absolutely amazing. So I met Salah through Anthony. So Anthony and Salah know each other from stunting, and I was looking for a good bad guy, and Anthony was like, "Oh, I've got you," and I was like, "Okay." And I talked to Salah on the phone. He has the New Zealand accent, which is awesome, like Hans Gruber, Die Hard, and yeah, it was just like off the bat, like I definitely vibed with Salah right away, and he's all in. And there's a scene, you probably remember the poker scene, like just unbelievable performance. Like Salah, every time I watch that, I've seen the movie probably at least 180 times, I think, just from watching cuts and stuff. And every time I watch it in the theater and I watch the poker scene, I'm always like,
It's the stillness he brings to it, really. It's like, I think some actors might have been tempted to put more on it, which kind of takes away. Like, if you've got someone you really want to be scared of, they have to be perfectly still, perfectly comfortable. And he really brought that in spades, I felt.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, no, I couldn't have been more blessed to have him fill that role.
And finally, you just mentioned him there, Mike Ferguson, the associate, the heavy for the film. And Jesus, that is a scary looking guy in the film.
Yeah, Mike is a unique individual. He's but he's all in too. Like when we were doing the River Day, I was like, hey, just let you guys know what we're doing. Like, we're gonna be on the river. If the police come, just have them go to me. Like, and I was getting a little, the day or two leading up to the River Day, I was getting a little nervous. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I have 20 people coming to this location, and I just wanted to double check to make sure everyone was okay. And when I asked Mike, he was like, F yeah. He's like, let's do this. He was just game for anything, and just really such an incredible presence he has. Like, he reminds me of Tom Sizemore from back in Heat and Black Hawk Down, and just an incredible presence he has, and a great guy. He's probably the hardest working man in Hollywood too. I'm not sure if you checked his credits. He works a lot.
Yeah. And what was the one thing that you'll kind of take away from this? What was the thing you learned the most on the last deal?
Don't do it again. The biggest takeaway I had was, when I have the ability to be with a bunch of like-minded people that collaborate, we're all on the same page, we all bought in, you can really make incredible things happen. And I hope that whatever movies I have going forward, I can always find that same team, that you go all in together, and you all understand it, you're all on the same page, and people bring their own opinions and thoughts and creative choices, and it really makes for a really fun environment to explore and create.
I absolutely love the film, but I think there's so much happening in it. I never know quite how to describe it to people. I kind of like give them the kind of tagline about it being someone who's kind of like dealing in marijuana, and then they, like, when it becomes legalized, that makes it more difficult. How do you describe it to people? How do you get people excited about the film?
I basically just tell them the log line. You have a black market cannabis dealer that makes one last deal before getting squeezed out of the business when marijuana becomes legal. And I tell them that, and people are intrigued, and then, like, it's action packed. So I built a story that is an energetic roller coaster ride that keeps gaining momentum as the film goes on. And I feel it's unique, and it has its own individual voice, and it's unique for the genre. And I have no control over what people think of it, but I think whoever watches it will enjoy it.
I think it's just such an important conversation, at very least, to have at the moment around marijuana. I understand that kind of there's a lot of people who feel like it should be illegal, and of course they need to be involved in the conversation too. But just like kind of knowing how many people it helps with kind of anxiety, with physical ailments, with so many other things. Just thank you for highlighting the issues around it, and the fact that even though it's legal, it's still having these problems around kind of working as a legit business.
Absolutely. And like, we're not a stoner film, so like there's nothing like that happening in the film. I don't glorify it or anything like that. It's basically just the background, the business that our character is in. But with that being said, yeah, I mean, there's so many positives for it, and and it's basically we're seeing prohibition for marijuana back the way alcohol was, and alcohol is way worse. But the way it helps people that have PTSD, that have certain ailments in their body. You know, it is a medicine if you use it correctly, and I think and I think it does have more pros and cons, and hopefully those in the Senate will realize that after a while and change their minds.
If anything, you said you don't glorify it, and you really do not. Like when you show the kind of like shadier end of the business, shall we say, the more illegal end of it, where people have to kind of borrow money to do deals and stuff. Yeah, you definitely did not shy away from that side of it. And in fact, I think if anything, that's more of an argument for legalization, because look what happens when it's not legal.
Yeah, no, it's real. Like that stuff happens all the time. Just Google dispensary break-ins, and you'll see, because these dispensaries, like they're keeping tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the ones that aren't sophisticated are keeping millions of dollars on site. And people break in and they take it, and it's causing deaths, and it's pretty bad. Like imagine like think about every 7-Eleven and gas station that gets hit, you know?
Yeah.
Now, when those get hit, there's maybe hundreds or thousands of dollars on site. But people who know in these dispensaries, there's always tens of thousands of dollars on site. So and they don't have the security that banks have. So, you know, I've been actually thinking about that for my next film. It's just someone that goes around, they hit marijuana shops, you know?
I was going to ask, have you got the next story ready to go? Is that the one you're looking at?
No, I mean, I haven't written it, and I don't want to put that thought in anyone's heads, but we see it on the news all the time, and it's dangerous. You know, these dispensary owners need access to banking so they can safely put their money in a bank, and that they can take out loans and get tax incentives that everyone else gets.
Jonathan, thank you so much for this film. I really enjoyed it. I think I always love indie film, even if I don't necessarily love the film. I always love the fact that kind of like it's made with such love. But this one is.
Well, hopefully you did like this film.
No, I genuinely do. I'm not making that up. But it's like I think this one is so expansive, and as I say, what you managed to do on an indie budget is incredible. So thank you very much. The Last Deal, it's out on VOD as well as in cinemas. I take it in cinemas in America?
Yeah, so it'll be playing in select cities on February 3rd. If you go to thelastdealmovie.com and just click on showtimes, you can see all the places it's playing. We're doing Q&As in Los Angeles and one in Santa Barbara the weekend it's released, which is February 3rd. And then it's on VOD for everyone to access, I believe, in just the United States. I don't think we're outside the US yet. We might be in Canada, and that's on February 7th.
Do you know when we're getting in the UK?
I don't know. Like we're talking to our international buyers right now, so this should all be happening pretty soon.
Excellent. Guys, please do keep an eye on all the announcement. It's really, I think, in the most complimentary way, I think it's a wonderful popcorn action movie where you just sit back and you just enjoy it. And it's, as I say, I think there is something really educational about the state of play with things in this particular area at the moment. So thank you very much, Jonathan. It's been really great talking to you tonight.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been Dr. Squee. That was my show. In a world where you can be truly anything, please be kind. And the credits should pop in. Apparently